I never told Emma the truth about my job. Not because I was embarrassed, but because I needed to experience the world from the perspective of the people who worked for me. There's something raw and unguarded in the way employees talk when they think they're just talking about another coworker. It's the closest you can get to real honesty in a corporate world built on niceties and forced smiles. To Emma, I was simply a warehouse loader, moving crates and driving forklifts at Murphy Logistics. What she didn't know, what no one at the warehouse knew, was that I actually owned the company. Murphy Logistics had always been my father's dream, his legacy. When he passed away, the company became mine. But sitting behind a sleek mahogany desk in a suit, making decisions from a sterile office, never felt right to me. I wanted to truly understand my employees, to know what they went through every day. So, I took on a new identity, Ben Audley, warehouse worker. For the last 2 years, I've been working alongside men who had no idea that the guy sweating next to them was the one who signed their paychecks. The irony? My wife worked in the company too, but not on the warehouse floor. Emma had quickly moved up the ranks, landing a comfortable executive position. She was one of those people in air-conditioned boardrooms, analyzing spreadsheets and making decisions about operations, all without stepping foot on the loading docks. Emma and I had been married for 6 years. When we first met, she loved my simple life, at least. That's what she always said. I wasn't someone obsessed with climbing the corporate ladder. I clocked in, clocked out, and spent my free time with her. We lived in a modest house, drove decent cars, and took small vacations when we could afford them. She told me she liked that life. She said she didn't need anything more. Maybe that was the first lie. That morning, I showed up at the warehouse at 6 a.m., just like every day. The air was filled with the smell of exhaust and cardboard, and the loading docks rang with the sound of men directing truck drivers into position. I enjoyed the work, simple, physical, honest. It kept me grounded. "Ben, grab that pallet and move it to dock 4, Tony called out, tossing me a pair of gloves. Tony was one of the veterans, a guy with rough hands and a belly full of beer and poor decisions. He liked to talk, and I liked to listen. As I drove the forklift into place, I heard Tony and a few others chatting by the vending machines. "You hear about the execs?" one of them said. "Bastards are probably giving themselves another bonus while we're stuck busting our asses." Tony grunted. "Murphy used to care about this place when his old man was around." "Yeah? Just another suit in a fancy office, counting his money," another voice chimed in. I felt a sting, but I kept my expression neutral. It wasn't the first time I'd heard something like that. "But you? You wouldn't last a day down here," someone else added. "Those rich pricks wouldn't know a hard day's work if it smacked them in the face." I wanted to say something, to defend myself, to tell them that I had been here, sweating and working beside them for 2 years. But I kept quiet. That was the whole point, wasn't it? To see the world without the filter of hierarchy. At home, Emma was in the kitchen, wearing her favorite silky robe and sipping coffee while scrolling through her phone. When I walked in, she glanced up, offering a half-smile. "Tough day?" she asked. "Same as always," I replied, setting my keys on the counter. Trucks were late. Tony was complaining. She smirked. "You really should do something else, Ben. You're too smart to be breaking your back in a warehouse." I leaned against the counter, watching her. It wasn't the first time she had said something like that. She used to admire my work ethic. She used to say she loved how I wasn't obsessed with money. Lately, though, I'd started noticing these small comments from her, hints, subtle nudges, as if something had shifted between us. And then there was the way she talked about work. She never mentioned me or the warehouse floor. It was like the warehouse, the people who actually made the company run, didn't exist in her world. She'd talk about corporate meetings, budgets, and how the executives were always under pressure. I wondered if she ever stopped to think about the men on the floor, the ones lifting, sweating, and actually making the company profitable. "It's honest work," I said, as I always did. She hummed, taking another sip of her coffee. Honest doesn't always mean smart. That night, I lay awake beside her, staring at the ceiling, a strange, nagging feeling settling in my chest. Something wasn't right. Maybe it had been off for a while, but I had either been too blind or too trusting to notice. I had built my life around 2 things, hard work and trust. But I was about to learn that one of them had already been broken. The warehouse had its own rhythm, machines grinding, forklifts beeping, metal scraping against concrete. It was the sound of hard work, of sweat, of labor. It was the heartbeat of the company, my company. But in the quiet moments, when no one was paying attention, you could hear things you weren't supposed to. And that morning, I heard something I shouldn't have. I had just finished unloading a shipment when I heard my name cut through the hum of the warehouse. Not Ben, but Murphy. I stopped, gripping the forklift handle a little tighter. It was William's voice, one of the younger guys, cocky, always had something sharp to say. And he was talking to someone. Then I heard her. Emma. My stomach twisted, but I stayed still. They were on the other side of the crates, out of view. I knew I should walk away, but something in Emma's tone made my breath catch. It wasn't her usual polished voice. It was sharper. Angrier. Are you seriously still with him? William scoffed. Come on, Em. You're running the show up there in corporate, and your husband's just some loser breaking his back down here. That's gotta be exhausting. Emma sighed. You have no idea. There was a chuckle from William, then a pause. And then she said it. He's garbage, William. My chest tightened. The words cut deeper than I expected. An absolute waste, she continued. I can't even stand to look at him some days. He comes home all sweaty and disgusting, acting like his stupid little warehouse job actually matters. Like it's some noble thing. Like he's contributing, she added bitterly. William laughed. Yeah. Meanwhile, you're up there making real moves. Exactly, Emma replied. I'm handling major accounts, dealing with executives, making actual money, while he's down here playing with pallets like some pathetic little worker bee. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay quiet. William's voice shifted, more curious now. So why are you still with him? Emma sighed again, and I could hear the irritation in her voice. Because, believe it or not, he's actually useful, she muttered. Useful? William echoed, sounding surprised. Oh, come on, William, Emma continued. You think all my money comes from my salary? There was a pause. William whistled low. Damn. You mean? Exactly, Emma said, her voice lowering. Ben is completely clueless. He doesn't even notice the little changes I've made to the books. He has no idea how much money I've been funneling out of this place and into our private accounts. And the best part? I felt my breath catch. What? William asked, sounding curious. She laughed softly. He signs off on half of it without even knowing. That idiot trusts me completely. My fist tightened, my knuckles turning white. She wasn't just making fun of me. She wasn't just embarrassed by me. She was stealing from me. From my own company. William let out a low laugh. Shit, Em. That's cold. Oh, please, she scoffed. He's too dumb to notice. And even if he did, what's he gonna do? What power does he have? I turned and walked away, my heart pounding in my chest. She had no idea what I was about to do. She had no idea that power was the one thing I had in plenty. I didn't go to work the next day, or the one after that. I told the warehouse manager I was sick. He barely acknowledged it before moving on. That was the thing about blue-collar jobs. People came and went, and no one really cared. I was just another guy moving crates, just another faceless worker doing the grunt work for a paycheck. And that's exactly how Emma and William saw me. But they had no idea who I really was. I sat alone in my office, staring at my laptop, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Emma had always handled the company's finances, and I let her. That was my first mistake. Now, I needed answers. But I couldn't do this on my own. I picked up my phone and made 3 calls. The first was to Jack Brickman, an old friend from college. Jack was a tech genius, the kind of guy who could hack into just about anything if you gave him enough time. We hadn't talked in years, but he owed me a favor. The second was to Madison Dodson, my lawyer. She was excellent at her job and had experience with financial fraud cases. If anyone could help me build a case against Emma and William, it was her. The third call was to Archie Forster, my closest friend, my confidant, and the only person who knew what Emma had done before I even spoke a word. Archie had been my best man at our wedding, and now he was going to help me take down the woman I married. 2 hours later, Jack showed up at my house. Damn, man, he said, shaking his head as he leaned against my desk. Haven't heard from you in what, 5 years? And now you need a hacking job? I didn't smile. I need surveillance, I said. Jack raised an eyebrow. Surveillance. I pulled up the documents I had found, the fake invoices, the missing money, the hidden transactions. My wife and William are stealing from me, I said. From my company. I need to know exactly how deep this goes. Jack studied the documents, whistling under his breath. This is serious, he said. You're telling me she's been funneling company money into private accounts? I nodded. And I need proof. Not just bank records. I need to see them talking about it. I need video, audio, something undeniable. Jack cracked his knuckles. All right, I can install some cameras, set up remote access to their phones, monitor emails. But if they're careful, they're not, I interrupted. William's an idiot. And Emma thinks I'm too dumb to notice. Jack smirked. That's your advantage, then. He got to work, setting up a system that would give me live access to Emma's and William's conversations. He planted cameras in their office, installed a program on Emma's laptop that copied every email she sent, and tapped into William's phone records. It was all illegal, and I didn't care, because Emma and William had already stolen from me. And now, I was going to take everything from them. The next day, I met with Madison in her downtown office. Madison listened carefully as I laid it all out: Emma's financial fraud, the stolen money, the fake business accounts. She flipped through the documents, her expression growing more serious with each page. This is bad, she said finally. But without solid proof, it's just numbers on a screen. You need something concrete. I slid a flash drive across the desk. Jack had worked fast. The drive contained emails, text messages, and recorded phone calls, evidence of Emma and William discussing their scheme, talking openly about how they had been stealing from the company for months. Madison plugged it into her laptop, scrolling through the files. Her eyes widened. This is enough to bury them, she said. Not just in a divorce settlement. This could lead to criminal charges. That's the idea. She leaned back in her chair, tapping her fingers against the desk. If you go forward with this, Emma won't just lose her job, she warned. She could go to prison. Are you ready for that? I thought about the words I had overheard in the warehouse. He's garbage. An absolute waste. He signs off on half of it without even knowing. That idiot trusts me completely. I met Madison's gaze. Yes. That night, I sat in my office, staring at my laptop as Jack's surveillance system fed live footage straight to my screen. Emma and William were in his office, speaking in hushed voices. Emma sat on the edge of his desk, a glass of wine in hand, looking completely at ease. This is going to be perfect, she said, swirling the wine in her glass. Once the final transfer is done, we'll have everything we need. William smirked. And your idiot husband? Emma laughed. What about him? He has no clue. He's off breaking his back in that warehouse, thinking he's actually contributing something. My jaw clenched, my fists tightening in my lap. William leaned in. And you're sure no one will notice the money missing? Emma rolled her eyes. William, come on. I've been skimming off the top for years. No one has noticed yet. And once we're in the new house, it won't even matter. William grinned. Speaking of which, I checked in today. Everything's set up. We can move in by the end of the month. I leaned forward, my heart pounding. They already had a house. Emma and William weren't just planning to leave me. They had already set up their escape. And I had been blind to it. I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to stay calm. They thought they had one. They thought I was too stupid to see it happening. But now I had everything I needed. I closed my laptop, my jaw tightening. Tomorrow, the real game would begin. The next morning, I didn't lace up my work boots. I didn't grab my warehouse gloves. I didn't drive to the loading docks, ready for another day of hard labor. Instead, I put on a suit. A sharp, black, tailored suit. The kind a man wears when he's walking into battle, ready to burn everything down. Today wasn't just another day at work. Today, I was going to remind them exactly who I was. I arrived at Murphy Logistics headquarters at exactly 9 a.m., walking through the glass doors with purpose. I belonged here. More than that, I owned this place. The receptionist barely glanced at me, likely assuming I was just another corporate visitor. That assumption lasted right up until the moment I stepped into the executive boardroom. Inside, Emma and William sat among the other department heads, sipping coffee, laughing, completely at ease. They had no idea what was coming. Emma's laughter died the second her eyes landed on me. Her face stiffened, her lips parted slightly. Ben? What are you? I didn't answer. Instead, I stepped forward and dropped a thick folder onto the long conference table. The sharp thud of paper hitting would cut through the room like a gunshot. Conversations halted. Every executive, every manager, every so-called decision-maker turned toward me. I let the silence settle for a moment before speaking. Good morning, I said, my voice even controlled. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Benjamin Murphy. I let the name sink in. You know, the actual owner of this company. Silence. Someone coughed. A few people exchanged puzzled glances, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Across the table, Emma looked frozen, her face drained of color. Her fingers were clenched tightly around the coffee cup in front of her, as if it were the only thing keeping her grounded. William, on the other hand, had gone completely rigid, his usual smug expression replaced with something far less confident. I gave them a moment to absorb the shock. Then I continued. For the past 2 years, I've been working in the warehouse under the name Ben Audley, learning exactly how this company operates from the ground up. I wanted to understand how my employees were treated, how my managers handled their responsibilities, and most importantly, who I could trust. I turned my gaze directly to Emma. Turns out, I shouldn't have trusted my own wife. A wave of gasps spread through the room. Emma shot to her feet. Ben, this isn't the time or place. I ignored her. I reached into the folder, pulled out the first document, and held it up for everyone to see. This, I said, is a financial statement showing hundreds of thousands of dollars funneled out of this company and into private accounts. Accounts controlled by Emma Peterson and William Longman. A ripple of disbelief spread across the table. Some executives leaned in, whispering urgently to each other. I set the paper down and lifted another. These, I continued, are email transcripts. Emails between Emma and William, explicitly outlining their plan to steal from this company, manipulate payroll records, and fabricate vendor transactions to cover their tracks. William's mouth opened slightly, as if he wanted to say something, but nothing came out. I wasn't finished. I reached into my pocket, pulled out a small remote, and clicked the button. The large screen at the front of the boardroom flickered to life. And then the recording began. Emma and William, sitting in his office, wine in hand, laughing as they bragged about how much money they had stolen. Emma's voice filled the room, crisp and undeniable. Ben is too stupid to figure it out. Then William's voice followed, just as cocky. He signs off on half of it without even knowing. And then the final nail in the coffin. Once the final transfer is done, we're out of here. The room fell deathly silent. No one moved. No one spoke. Emma sat motionless, her face pale as ash. Her lips parted, but no words came out. William had stiffened, his forehead beaded with sweat. They knew. They weren't walking out of this unscathed. And then, just as I expected, Emma snapped. She slammed her hands on the table, her face twisting with rage. You spied on me? She shrieked. You hacked my emails? You invaded my privacy? I tilted my head, pretending to consider her words. Oh, I'm sorry, Emma. Was I supposed to just let you and William rob me blind? Her lip trembled, but I wasn't finished. Reaching into the folder one last time, I pulled out a termination notice, both Emma's and William's names printed in bold letters at the top. I let it fall onto the table in front of them. You're both fired, I said, my voice calm. Effective immediately. Emma's mouth opened, but I didn't give her the chance to speak. You thought I was weak, I continued. You thought I was too blind to see what was happening. But here's the thing, I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice. You made one mistake. Emma froze, her breath hitching. You underestimated me. William shot to his feet, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. You can't do this, he shouted, his voice cracking. We built this company. We. I ignored him and turned instead to Amanda Humphrey, the head of legal. She had been sitting quietly, reviewing the documents I had handed her. Amanda, I said evenly, what's the legal recourse for corporate fraud, embezzlement, and breach of fiduciary duty? Amanda let out a slow breath, carefully setting the papers down before looking up at Emma and William. Her voice was cold, detached. At minimum, she said, they're looking at prison time. Emma made a choking sound. William stumbled backward, his face now completely drained of color, panic written all over him. I took a step back, straightening my suit jacket. Security is waiting outside to escort you both off the premises, I added, glancing toward the door. And don't bother trying to fight this. I let my next words hang in the air. I've already sent the evidence to the authorities. Expect a criminal investigation within the next 48 hours. Emma shook her head violently, her breathing ragged. Ben, please, she whispered, her voice cracking as she reached toward me. You don't have to do this. We can talk. We can. I took a step back, avoiding her touch like she was poison. There's nothing to talk about, I said, my voice firm. Not anymore. Before she could say another word, the doors burst open. 2 security guards stepped in, their presence making the room feel even smaller. One of them turned to me. Mr. Murphy? I nodded. Take them out. Emma started begging. William started cursing. But none of it mattered. As they were dragged from the room, I turned back to the board of executives, the men and women who had just witnessed every lie unravel before their eyes. Some of them were still whispering behind their hands, stunned by everything that had just unfolded. I adjusted my cufflinks, straightened my tie. Then, in a voice calm and controlled, I said, Now, let's talk about getting this company back on track. Within a week, both Emma and William were arrested. The fraud charges alone were enough to ensure that neither of them would walk away from this unscathed. The new house they had bought? Seized. The money they had stolen? Frozen and recovered. The divorce? Filed immediately. Emma tried calling me. Over and over. I never answered. Because I didn't need to. I had already said everything I needed to say. And now? I was finally free. Free from the lies. Free from the betrayal. Free to rebuild. Not just my company, but myself. For a week, Emma called me every single day. At first, she was frantic. Desperate. Then, pleading. Please, you have to listen to me. Then came the guilt tripping. We built a life together. You can't just throw that away. And finally, the anger. You think you're better than me? You're nothing, Ben. Nothing. But I never answered. I had nothing left to say. Instead, I let my lawyer, Madison Dotson, speak for me. Emma received divorce papers within days of her arrest. The case was airtight: infidelity, financial fraud, and conspiracy to commit embezzlement. She had no leverage, no way to fight back. Her response was predictable: denial, outrage, the same manipulative tactics she had used throughout our marriage. But I was past caring. The last time I saw her was in a sterile conference room at Madison's law firm. Emma sat across from me, her once flawless composure cracked beyond repair. She looked exhausted, defeated, yet still clung to that last shred of arrogance. The one that made her believe she could still talk her way out of anything. You don't have to do this, she pleaded, her voice trembling. We can fix this, Ben. We can start over. I stared at her, feeling nothing. No pain. No regret. Not even hatred. Just contempt. You don't get it, do you? I said finally, my voice quiet. There's nothing to fix. I slid the signed divorce papers across the table. It's over, Emma. She looked at them like they were a death sentence. Maybe they were. Madison took the papers, scanned the signatures, and gave a firm nod. We'll finalize everything within a few weeks. Emma swallowed hard, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the table. And what am I supposed to do now? She asked, her voice hollow. I stood up, adjusting my jacket. That's not my problem anymore. And with that, I walked out. For the first time in years, I felt free. The company was in better hands now. I had made sure of that before stepping away, ensuring every trace of corruption was purged. The executives who had proven their loyalty and integrity were left to run it. I had no desire to be at the helm anymore. That chapter of my life was over. Instead, I went back to school. Corporate law had always been a passion of mine, one I had pushed aside when I took over my father's company. But now, I had the time and, more importantly, the experience to do it right. 3 years of hard work later, I landed a position at a top law firm specializing in financial fraud cases. I had learned the hard way how people could manipulate trust, how they could lie and steal without so much as a flicker of guilt. Now, I was using that knowledge to bring those people down, to make sure no one else suffered the way I had. One evening, after winning a major fraud case, I found myself sitting at a quiet downtown bar, nursing a drink and reflecting on everything that had happened. I had lost my wife. I had lost my company. I had lost the life I thought I was supposed to have. But strangely, I felt lighter than ever. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't broken. I was just a man who had survived. As I swirled my drink, I noticed a woman sitting a few seats away. She met my gaze and offered a small, knowing smile. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled back. Because life wasn't over. It was just beginning.